new claims coming from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Russians are claiming just minutes ago that there are Ukrainians operating on the Russian side of the border inside Russia. We'll have much more on that in just a moment. At the meantime, Ukrainian officials are saying they still hold on to some neighborhoods inside Bakhmut, which is that city in the Far East the Russians claim to have captured. It has been one of the most hotly contested cities, the bloodiest battlefields of the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky mourned the devastation there over the weekend.
Mr. President, President Zelensky, is Bakhmut still in Ukraine's hands? The Russians say they've taken Bakhmut.
I think no. But you have to understand that there is nothing. They destroyed everything. There are no buildings. It's a pity, it's tragedy, but for today, Bakhmut is only in our hearts.
All right, CNN's Sam Kiley is in southeastern Ukraine. Sam, back to what we just reported a few moments ago. This claim from the Russians that Belgorod, which is this city over the border from Ukraine that we've shown on the map a number of times, just over the border from Ukraine, they say there are Ukrainian saboteurs operating in and around that area. What can you tell us?
Well, the Ukrainians say, yep, you're right, except they're not Ukrainians, they're Russians. And they're saying indeed that the unit themselves have put out a video saying that they are involved in this cross-border operation because they're members of the Freedom from Russia Legion, which is a group of Russian volunteers who are in the Ukrainian armed forces. They have in the past been fighting. When I encountered them back in December, they were fighting very heavily south of Bakhmut on the front line there. It now appears that they have crossed into Russia with an all-Russian team, according to the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainian government is saying somewhat coyly that they are operating there entirely as Russian citizens, as free agents, not as part of the Ukrainian armed forces. Although, of course, they're using Ukrainian uniforms, weapons, bullets, and arguably vehicles. Now, their spokesman, or the member of their political wing here in Ukraine, has told CNN that the combat is ongoing, and certainly social media would indicate from a number of videos that are being posted that they have deployed themselves in a number of villages very close to the border. This is the first time that we have confirmation from the Ukrainians that, let's say, a Ukrainian-backed organization, military organization, has conducted overt military action against Russia inside Russian territory. We've seen in the past covert military operations deep behind Russian lines here in Ukraine, and indeed mysterious activities inside Russia itself. There have even been helicopter gunship attacks close to the city of Belgorod in the past that the Ukrainians have refused to acknowledge. But this is a first, John.
Yeah, Sam, let me just point out on the map here so people can see. We keep talking about it. This is Belgorod right here, right over the border from Ukraine there. And a first, as you note, a first of the Ukrainians confirming that, at least at a minimum, pro-Ukrainian forces are operating inside Russian territory. Sam Kiley, a significant development. We'll come back to you in a bit. Thank you.
Let's bring in retired U.S. Army Major Mike Lyons. It's good to have you, as always. So let's begin there, because Zelensky's saying not for sure that Bakhmut has fallen to the Russians. The Wagner Group is saying it has. Why is it significant? Not strategically, but propaganda-wise?
Propaganda, that's all that's going on here. This is the twilight part of this battle at this point. There's nothing tactically more to be gained. The city has been flattened fundamentally. It's more or less, it shows Ukrainian resilience, but also Russian military failure. They're trying to claim some kind of victory right now that just isn't there.
Okay. So also a shift in the Biden administration's views on F-16s over the weekend, right?
Yep.
At least greenlighting joint training of F-16 pilots.
Yep.
With our European allies. Why is that significant? Because, as you know, Wall Street Journal editorial board, very critical that it's taken this long. They write about it. The obvious question is why this decision took 15 months.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. First of all, let's be clear right about this. The F-16s are not going to be game-changing to the situation on the ground. It's not going to give air superiority to the Ukraine military. There's going to be a very long time before they're actually going to be impactful. I think it took that long because from a strategic perspective now, you're going to see Ukraine eventually in NATO. This is really kind of a fait accompli now because of them getting this platform.
Because of fighter jets, not previous weapons like HIMARS, et cetera?
No, this is a strategic weapon. So, like, for example, Zelensky tells President Biden he's not going to attack into Russia because the F-16 gives him that capability.
Right.
Hard border, right, around between Ukraine and Russia here. There's targets in Belgorod. There's air base targets here, missile sites along this border here. There's multiple sites that the F-16 now has capability to attack that cross that border, and that violates. That's where that from these weapons were supposed to be defensive now become offensive.
Looking at the countries where it's likely that the F-16s would come from, if not the United States, what?
So I think these 4 countries are the ones that likely give up the F-16s they have that are in their inventory as they transition to F-35s. Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Maybe 30 to 60 or so F-16s within the next few months. It's still going to take significant amount of time. 3 major issues here. We got to train pilots. We have to make sure the pilots are up to speed on what's going on. That's going to be 4 to 6 months, and it's a surmountable challenge right now. But maintenance and sustainability of these things are going to be a key. There's some spare parts that they're not even made anymore. Lastly, what are the munitions going to look like? What are those airframes are going to be on them? Because the F-16 is a platform, does a lot of different things.
I'll note it. This pilot training is a reason why a number of members of Congress, especially Republicans, were calling on the Biden administration to start the training earlier in case we got to this point. Let's talk about what was signed overnight. The president had to cancel his leg of this trip, so he didn't go for a first ever, what would have been a historic visit, first American president to go to Papua New Guinea. But Secretary Blinken went, and overnight they have come out with a joint defense agreement, a maritime agreement. Can you speak to the significance of that given the rising influence of China in the region?
Yeah, big win for the administration diplomatically. Papua New Guinea is a location right north of Australia. It provides tremendous place for the Navy to project power from, naval assets. We saw the Chinese make deals with the Solomon Island countries before. There's going to be this pivot to the Pacific that's finally now taking place. I think it's very important that this administration did that. Very big win for the administration.
Okay, thank you, Mike Lyons. Great to have you, as always, Major Mike Lyons.